She was officially dead for 15 years. Then save the president's daughter. The marble floor gleamed beneath the fluorescent lights, sterile and perfect, except for the crimson stain spreading slowly across it. A girl's terrified breath hitched, shallow and uneven, as two men in black suits dragged her toward the end of the corridor. She kicked once, twice, but their grip was iron. The insignia, stitched across her torn school blouse, was unmistakable. The crest of the President's Academy, a place supposedly impenetrable, a sanctuary guarded more fiercely than any fortress. And yet here she was, America's most untouchable child. The president's daughter, gasping for air as strangers pulled her into the shadows. At that same instant, from the far end of the corridor, a figure emerged. Not a whisper preceded her arrival. No one had seen her step past the guards or slip through the locked gates. She was simply there, a silhouette carved against the sterile light, her presence both ordinary and impossible. The men dragging the girl froze, an instinctive shiver creeping up their spines, though they couldn't yet name why. Her uniform was outdated, a style no longer in service for over a decade. The insignia on her chest gleamed faintly, a unit long dissolved. And yet her gaze, sharp, unwavering, forged in battles long buried, burned with the weight of someone who had already walked through death itself. For 15 years, the government had stamped her file with one word: deceased. And yet here, she was very much alive, and about to alter history. Her name was once whispered with reverence in covert halls: Major Elena Veyra. She had been a ghost soldier, one of the few trusted with missions where failure was not an option. Officially, she died in an ambush 15 years ago. Her body never recovered, her sacrifice memorialized with empty honors. The president himself had spoken at her funeral. A folded flag had been handed to her grieving mother. Monuments bore her name. And yet Elena had walked away from that battlefield, broken, bleeding, but alive. She had disappeared into shadows, erased herself by choice, for reasons no one had understood. Until now. Elena's memory of that night still haunted her. The sand had been cold, the desert wind slicing against her torn skin. She remembered the smell of burning metal, of comrades' uniforms smoldering in the wreckage. She remembered voices screaming through static-filled radios, then cutting off into silence. She had crawled for hours, her body broken, her blood soaking the earth. And then she had stood, against all reason, walking into the wastelands where maps no longer guided men. In those years after, she lived nameless, carrying the weight of survivors' guilt like a second spine. To the world, she was a decorated ghost. To herself, she was an exile who had failed to die when she was supposed to. Now, in the polished corridor of the academy, she moved with a silence more terrifying than any shouted order. The men holding the president's daughter stiffened as her shadow lengthened across the floor. They barked questions. Who are you? How did you get in here? But she didn't answer. She didn't need to. There is a power in silence that words can never reach. Her calm steps carried the weight of an unbroken oath. She had once sworn to defend her country against all enemies, foreign or domestic. That vow had no expiration date, no loophole written in time. And today, it was being tested once more. The girl struggled again, her voice breaking in a desperate plea. But the men shoved her harder, sneering at Elena as though she were nothing more than a relic, a stray officer who hadn't realized her war had ended long ago. One reached for his weapon. Elena's hand twitched, not toward her holster, which was empty, but toward the thin baton strapped to her thigh. It was the same weapon she had carried in the ambush 15 years earlier, scarred, blackened, almost ceremonial now. To most, it was an artifact. To her, it was survival. The hallway thickened with tension, air heavy as if the building itself held its breath. And then, in a voice softer than any threat, Elena finally spoke her first words in 15 years. "Let the child go." Instead of obeying, the men laughed, an ugly, hollow sound. One mocked her uniform, outdated and patched. Another spat that she was no one, that her name was forgotten, that she had no authority here. The girl's frightened eyes darted between them, then to Elena, who stood motionless, her silence louder than their insults. People were gathering now, bystanders in the corridor, teachers, staff. Yet no one intervened. Fear paralyzed them, complicit in their stillness. The injustice was sharp, biting. A decorated soldier who had once been honored by the nation was now ridiculed as a relic. A child whose life should have been sacred was treated like currency. And the world stood by, watching. Elena didn't argue. She didn't shout back. She simply walked closer, each step steady, measured. Her eyes never left the girls, silently promising, "You are safe." One of the men pressed the muzzle of his gun against the child's temple, smirking. One more step, and she dies. The crowd gasped, but Elena did not falter. She had faced death too many times to believe in its threats. And then, for the briefest moment, her sleeve shifted, revealing a tattoo inked into her wrist, a unit insignia long erased from official records. One that only the highest-ranking officers would recognize. And among the onlookers, one man did. The Academy's security chief, a retired admiral, went pale. His voice broke the silence in a whisper that carried down the hall. "That tattoo's real." The words changed everything. The crowd, once frozen, stirred. Whispers spread like wildfire. Her name surfaced again, disbelief turning to awe. Elena Veyra, the ghost who had died 15 years ago. The men holding the president's daughter shifted uneasily. Their grip faltered, uncertainty creeping into their movements. The girl, sensing it, wrenched free for a split second. That was all Elena needed. In one blur of motion, she closed the distance. Her baton cracked against the wrist of the man with the gun, disarming him before the crowd even blinked. The second man lunged, but Elena's counter was faster, sharper, honed by years of silent exile. He hit the marble floor with a thud, groaning, the weapon skittering away. The girl stumbled backward, collapsing into the safety of Elena's arm. For the first time in 15 years, Elena held someone not as a soldier, not as a survivor, but as a protector reborn. As the crowd erupted shouts, footsteps, alarms, Elena stood tall, her words cutting through the chaos. "Dead is only what they called me, but honor never dies." The admiral stepped forward, saluting her with trembling hands, eyes wet, and Elena, eyes steady, gave her final truth. The measure of a soldier is not the medals they wear, but the lives they save when no one is watching. Within minutes, reinforcements stormed the hall, apprehending the would-be abductors. But it wasn't the spectacle of force that mattered. It was the silence, the way every bystander, every teacher, every guard, stood in quiet respect as Elena guided the president's daughter to safety. No applause broke out, no cheers, just a collective stillness, heavier and more sacred than any sound. In that silence, Elena Veyra's 15 years of exile dissolved. She was no longer a ghost. She was the soldier who came back from the dead to keep her vow. History books would later debate how she survived the ambush. Politicians would argue whether she had deserted or been abandoned, but none of it mattered in that moment. What mattered was that when the world needed her most, when a child's life hung between light and darkness, Elena Veyra chose to stand again. Respect is not given in speeches or etched in medals. It is earned in silence, in sacrifice, in standing when everyone else is frozen by fear. And as Elena disappeared once more into the shadows, the president's daughter safe in her mother's arms, truth lingered. Some heroes never truly die. Heroes like Elena Veyra remind us that the strongest vows are silent, that true honor is unseen, and that sometimes the dead rise not for themselves, but for the living. If this story moved you, share where in the world you're watching from. Leave your reflections in the comments below, and subscribe for more stories.